Hello, everyone. Sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Simone Verkaert. I'm the head of programs of Global Resilience Partnership, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to this learning webinar on the flood resilience measurement for communities tool. As you can see here on the slides, we're hosting this webinar as the Global Resilience Partnership together with the Zurich Foundation and with speakers from Lutheran World Relief and Practical Action. I realize some people are still joining. I hope you can hear me. David, can you give me a thumbs up if my sound is okay? Because I just lost connection. Okay, cool. Then I'll just go over some basic Zoom etiquette as we wait for more people to join us. As always, please mute yourself unless speaking. Otherwise, we will mute you. Do not show video unless you're speaking. This is to save bandwidth. If you do have a question or you want to ask something during the Q&A, then we encourage you to use your video, but please turn it off afterwards so that we can save bandwidth as much as possible. If you have any questions during the presentation or during the panel discussion following that, please make sure to type them in the chat box. We will monitor them and we will ask those questions. We will give you a chance to ask those questions later during the Q&A. It would be helpful to us also if you can indicate your organization behind your name. And you can do it by going to the participants menu in Zoom, click more, and then select rename and just type your organization name behind your own name. As you can see, and as you should have been notified, this webinar is being recorded and live streamed. And by participating in the webinar, you give us consent for this. If you do run into any technical issues, then please contact Ida Gabrielson in the chat. So what are we going to do today? I'll give you a very brief overview of this webinar and the outline of what we will discuss before handing over to David Nash from the Zurich Foundation, who will be introducing the Flood Resilience Alliance and give us a practical presentation of the Flood Resilience Measurement for Communities tool. After that, we will hear a guided Q&A or discussion with Narayan Giawali from Lutheran World Relief and Bikram Rana from Practical Action, who will give us a testimonial of using the Flood Resilience Measurement for Communities tool in the field. After that, and we were asking you to prepare your questions for that, there will be a Q&A with the participants and speakers that I'll moderate before handing over for final wrap-up, reiteration of his offer, and closing to David Nash. Now, this will be the first in a series of measurement webinars hosted by the Resilience Knowledge Coalition, and I do hope you will enjoy it, and I'm sure you will. David, over to you. Stop sharing, you can take over.
Thank you very much, Simone, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone on the call. I hope you can now see my screen instead of Simone's, and I'm getting a thumbs up from Simone, so clearly that's working, which is really great. So just by way of an introduction, my name is David Nash. I'm the Senior Manager for Climate Change Adaptation and Partnerships with the Zurich Foundation. I've been in an association with the Global Resilience Partnership since 2015, when we supported the Water Window Challenge, and a number of parties, a number of partners from the partnership I met at that particular point. And in fact, we'll be talking to one of them specifically on this call with Narayan Giawali from Lutheran World Relief. So welcome everyone to this webinar. What my intention to do today is to try and spend the next 15 or so minutes giving you an overview of what the Flood Resilience Measurement for Communities approach is all about, to try and kind of position it and to show how it can be successful. With Narayan and with Bikram, we'll then look at that in a more practical detail. So without further ado, let's take a look at a little bit about where the FRMC came from. So back in 2013, the Zurich and the Zurich Foundation created a desire to work in the flood resilience space. So we built our first flood resilience program, launched in 2013. And today that program has 10 partners with it. Some are from the NGO and development sector, some are from academia. We have Zurich as a private sector partner, and we as the foundation also take part in that partnership too. It's a multi-sectoral partnership, that focuses on practical ways to help communities strengthen resilience to flood risk. Our vision, you can see on the slide, is that floods have no negative impact on people's and businesses' ability to thrive. And a kind of thrust or drive behind trying to deliver that is recognizing that that requires an increase in investments of all kinds to try and focus on helping communities build their pre-event resilience. The one quick first question to kind of ask, I guess, about that is why on earth we chose to focus on floods. Floods, as I think many of you will probably be aware, are the single biggest natural hazard in terms of losses. So when you take a look at all of the losses from all natural hazards combined, when we first started in 2013, floods exceeded the total from everywhere else. It's still the largest. It makes up around 48–49% on average of all losses. So floods, if we're going to bring focus into it, made sense for us to focus on the idea of looking specifically around flooding. Why did we focus on resilience, which would have been very easy for us to just have focused in around the relief and recovery space? After all, floods happen in just about every part of the world every year. There is always someone that needs to recover from where flooding was. Well, the reasons that we started to focus on resilience are very clear, and it's a very clear business case for focusing before the event. When we look pre-event, anecdotally and since backed up by a whole host of research evidence that we've accumulated, for every dollar you invest in advance of a flood, pre-event resilience building, on average saves around $5 in future losses, in avoided future losses. So the business case, the financial case, is really clear for why you would invest up front to try and prevent what damage there could be. And as a result of that, we kind of decided that we would focus in that space. The big challenge for this is that when it comes to disaster funding inevitably gets triggered when there's a disaster. And so much of it actually goes into the post-event relief and recovery space. So part of our rationale was thinking we need to get ahead of the curve. We need to try and find our way before the event, and in order to do that, we need to try and help funders make decisions about funding in that kind of space as well. So resilience made sense from a business case perspective. Our challenge is to argue for that business case. There's also a question about the level at which we chose to operate. There are a number of places in which you can choose to operate, and much good work happens at the international and national level. However, where impact is most closely felt is actually at the community level. And what we were really about is trying to have impact with people's lives. That happens at communities. Each community is unique and individual, and as a result of which we need to kind of drill down to the community level to really understand how best to take action with those communities. We can then, of course, use that evidence and use the experience that we have across the communities we work with to create more longer or larger kind of impact at different kinds of levels, taking examples from across multiple communities to lobby for systemic change at a higher level too. But clearly the impact that you feel is very much at a community level. So we choose to focus on floods, we choose to focus at a community level, and we choose to focus at pre-event resilience building rather than post-event relief. Now in 2014, the challenge that was thrown to us by choosing to make this program happen was came pretty well from the Foundation's board and said, so how do you know you've actually achieved success here? And that led us to a position of starting to think about measurement. Now, from a measurement point of view, and I've been involved with this program since the very beginning of it, from a measurement point of view, the challenge here was that there was nothing available that we could easily pick up and use as a measurement index. It was a really significant challenge to look at how you measure resilience. The literature at the time was full of articles talking about how you couldn't measure resilience. Resilience was an impossible concept too nebulous, too conceptual, for which you needed to have significant events in order to be able to measure whether you'd improved resilience or not. In 2014, Thomas Windle did a review of all the measurement frameworks that were out there, and there are as many measurement frameworks almost as there are resilience professionals. And what he discovered was that there was no general measurement framework that had been verified through evidence. There was nothing practical on the ground. So we set out with that challenge in mind, thinking we really needed to make a change here and to create an index, at least for ourselves, or an approach where we could understand how we measure resilience. So how did we go around doing that? Well, the first thing we needed to do was to understand exactly what we meant by resilience. As I've said, there are lots of different ways in which people have looked at resilience, lots of different frameworks, lots of different definitions, and I'm sure everyone on this call has come across one definition or another. By looking at all of those definitions, by trying to bring together all of the learning from across all those different definitions, the one thing that we became very clear about was that resilience and development go hand in hand. That if we are to build resilience in a community kind of sense, that had to be for a purpose, and the purpose was largely around enabling a community to continue on its development path. And you can see from the definition at the top of this slide that our definition of resilience is all about rooted in the community as a system. It's the ability of a system or community or society to pursue its social, ecological and economic development and growth objectives. So this is about continuing on its development path while managing disaster risk. So looking at the specific disasters that could happen within the community and managing that risk in a mutually reinforcing way over time. So this is very much about saying, if you build resilience right, you will protect your development gains. If you do development right, you'll build in resilience, and both of the two things together coming and reinforcing each other. Now that's all very well, and as I've said before, resilience as a concept is very, very kind of difficult to get hold of. It's also very difficult to know whether resilient outcomes, i.e. are you more resilient if you get hit by a flood? It's very difficult to measure that unless you get hit by the flood. And obviously that is very difficult to predict and certainly doesn't fit within a nice, neat program cycle. So it's great to understand what resilience is, but you really can't measure that very easily. So we had to start thinking, so what do we mean? What would it look like if you had a community that was resilient? Is there something in that we could measure? And that took us down into what is a theoretical model built originally through the built environment. So we actually went to the Multidisciplinary Centre for Earthquake Engineering Research and looked at their model, thinking about buildings as a system and thinking about how that could translate into communities as a system. And what that uncovered was a model of where resilience comes from. What kind of qualities does a system have if it has resilient outcomes? And that came up with this model called the 4 R's of resilience. How well is it built? Can it withstand the shock in the first place? Does it have fallback systems, things that it doesn't need normally, but when the primary system is disrupted, there's a fallback? Can you use it in multiple different ways and be resourceful with it and adapt to the situation as you see it? And can you respond rapidly? And those 4 R's, those 4 qualities of the system, are what leads to resilient outcomes. Now, if resilience is conceptual, this is also a very conceptual kind of view. It looks at it it's difficult to get hold of some of these qualities and go, I know how to put a measurement around that and say that's how we measure that. So we've made a step away from resilience into kind of trying to find out where it comes from, but we still needed to go further. This was a step that was still difficult to measure. And that then led us to think about where these qualities in a system might actually come from, and led us to understand what kind of provided these resilience qualities, these sources of resilience. Where did it come from in the first place? And when it comes down to it, when you take a look at a system, when you take a look at a community as a system, one of the things that you can say is that the community is made up of a number of different parts. It's made up of the built environment, of the way in which it sits within its ecosystem, the look at how resources are brought into the system in terms of financial resources or people resources, how the system is organized, and the interactions between the system, what people know and understand. All of those kinds of things are basically the building blocks of a community, the assets that a community has. And the contention here was that those assets are what makes up the community, and those assets are what provide these resilient qualities that are difficult to measure. Now, the great thing about these assets is that they're tangible. You can see them, feel them, touch them, investigate them, put a measure on them. And as a result of that, you can kind of see that the sources of resilience, where the community builds, uses and maintains its assets, provides the qualities that you need for resilient outcomes. So it's definitely a sort of a chain of connections to get to resilience outcomes. We can measure sources of resilience. Sources of resilience are, as I said, tangible. Now, we started off with 88 in here. We put this into the field in 110 communities over a 3-year period and tested those. That evolution took the number of sources down to 44 when we kind of removed some of the duplications and some of the codependencies, so that we had 44 discrete sources that we could use. And from there, we were able to kind of put a second version of this into the field, which is now operating across 24 different countries in around 300 or so communities. These 44 sources of resilience fall into a primary lens, if you like, a primary view, and we use another model here, which is the Sustainable Livelihoods Framework, to understand the makeup of the community. So we can fit all of these 44 sources across these 5 different capitals. That is definitely one view of how you can distribute these sources. However, it's not the only view. And one of the ways in which we've evolved our thinking around this tool is being able to understand the interconnections and interrelationships between these different sources. If a community is a system, one of the things you know is that if you pull on one lever in a system, it often has not only intended impact, but also unintended consequences. And understanding where those linkages are within the system is really important to understanding how you're going to affect change. This is one lens in which we look through those sources. We redistribute these sources across a number of different lenses, looking to see how they provide disaster risk management qualities, looking to see whether or not they fall into themed categories that are perhaps more intuitive to understand, looking to see whether they are things that the community can control or whether or not they're external to the community. All of these different lenses allow us to investigate how these sources work together. So how do we go about that? Well, how we go about that is through a process of data gathering and data evaluation. This is actually done through a piece of software. We don't have time in this program to be able to demonstrate that piece of software, but I'm very happy to offer that demonstration to anyone who is interested in it. Please do get in touch to do that. But the piece of software basically allows us to construct a data gathering model using a mixed method approach through secondary sources, focus group interviews, key informant interviews, household surveys, other information that you can gather, bringing all of that together and then grading it. And that grading process using an approach which Zurich uses for its understanding of risk, takes a standard, a definition of where good looks like in each of those different sources and grades it. Putting those grades together gives you a score, and monitoring that score and tracking that score over time enables you to understand how resilience is being built in a community. I'm going to go one more slide, Simone, before I go over this. And and that is to look at the kind of outcome of this tool. So this tool is definitely about measurement. It's about saying, how do you get to a point where you can measure what impact you're having? But it has had some real spin-off benefits as well. On the one hand, it is also a tool and a process that enables you to make better decisions. It generates data on resilience gaps and connects that knowledge to understanding the needs of a community. So it really does kind of get down into how resilience can be built using the community priorities as a decision making or helping to decide that. And it also provides evidence for advocacy. So where there are external forces which they can't control within a community, you can get outside to be able to advocate for it. And that's what the tool helps you to be able to do. So it's not just about measurement, it also helps you to prioritize your programming. The other thing it does very clearly is to build capacity. It builds your ability to create relationships with your stakeholders, both at a community level and outside. It fosters systems thinking, so starting to look not just in terms of a one trick, one hit kind of intervention, but something that has multiple benefits across the piece. And it provides resilience education, so people understand better what they're talking about when they're talking about resilience. So overall, this tool is a practical tool. It's a tool that is delivered on the ground. It helps you to measure the fundamental underlying pieces of the community that provide resilience. It provides you with an ability to be able to make better decisions, and it helps build your capacity and understanding, all within the tool. But let's not take my word for it. Let's see where it's been applied. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to turn to my two co-presenters in this, which are two representatives of two organisations that have used this flood resilience measurement for communities approach. On the one hand, we have Narayan Gwali. Narayan is the Programme Director for Lutheran World Relief in Nepal. I first met Narayan when LWR were doing a water window project. We actually met in Kathmandu and had a long conversation around a table at the end of a workshop session, looking at the FRMC as a potential tool. And he and his colleagues liked what they saw, and have since tried to deploy that within the work that they've been doing in Nepal in the cross-border transboundary projects between India and Nepal. So Narayan, thank you very much for agreeing to join us on this call. Can I just kind of ask you to share with us a little bit about what it is you found particularly useful? What does the FRMC actually helped you to be able to do within the TBR project?
Yeah, thank you, David. Firstly, I would like to thank you, the GRP, that inviting me in this meeting webinar, and thank you also for David that you have been included in your panel for me. And regarding your questions, how we have been benefited from this project. From this, the FRMC tools, you have given the seminar or briefing. Yes, as you already mentioned that we have been implementing the project that is called the Flood Resilience project in Nepal and India. It is a transboundary flood resilience project in India and Nepal. And we started this project since 2013. But at the meantime, we were also struggling that, how to showcase the, to the other external audience and internal audience that, what happens after the, implementing that project. And we were trying to use this, how to measure the flood resilience of the particular communities. At the meantime, we had also used, several other tools since 2017. But when we met you at Kathmandu and you gave us some orientations about this FRMC tool to us during our projects funded by GRP. So we really, when you gave this discussion, we got and you came down to training to us, and you gave us the training, and we used these tools initially at the the 4 communities. As we did a pilot in 4 communities, and after having this the tools with the 4 communities, we really got the good sense of the figures and the data it came through these tools. So firstly, it gives the resilience score of particular the communities, and it gives in a pictorial method, it gives in a quantitative method, so that it was very easy us to compare what is the situation of that particular communities of looking from the flood resilience perspective. And it was very fantastic to us to compare, okay, this community has this resilience score, let's say the 51, 52, then it was also a kind of the pressure to us who were implementing the project, that okay, we need to improve, we need to bring a better score on the next year or after the 6 months or something like that. And it give that kind of it was very useful for us from that perspectives as well. And from looking from the scores, how we came up with this the FRMC tools, it was also helpful for the decision making for us, that to redesign the project, because it gives the the figures from the holistic approach. As you already mentioned in your presentations, that we can zoom the results from the different angles. You talked about the the 5 capitals, the physical capitals, economic capitals, human capitals, where we stand, where our project is stand for, right? And if there are any things lacking, like let's say that natural capitals are lacking in our project framework, then we can think that okay, for the next time we can just build upon the other interventions on the natural capitals, so that we can make the better communities or more resilient communities on that part. And also it gives the different lens. We took it a lens from the the resilience properties, as you said, just like a 4R, from that view also we can review rapidity, resourcefulness, and redundancy kind of things. We can also look from that part, and we can review our programs where we are lacking or where we are stand for. And it gave us, as a management point of view, we also it was very helpful to redesign the project, redesign the interventions particularly, and we did it in our projects as well. So that was very helpful for us. It's not only that, but also the we had just looking from the one angle or 2 or 3 components, while designing or implementing the projects, for flood resilience project. But it also give us the the capacity building of our staffs, myself and my the co-workers, and also for the partners, that we have to look into the holistic approach to if we are running or implementing the some of the project in that areas. So these are the very benefit for us in our project. That's why we started this this flood resilient FRMC tools. We started with the 4 communities, then we got a very benefit from it, and we just expanded our this the tools to the more 12 communities. And currently we have also another project funded by the USAID BHA, and we are also expanding, scaling up that the tools to 14 more communities on that part. So it has been very beneficial for us, so that we have the whole pictures, and we can at least guide our partners, implementing partners, and also it's also management tools, so that the decision makers also can see the from the different perspective, that where we are and how the the communities are making the the progress on that part. So these are the some of the the benefit and how we have been using these tools. So I really appreciate that David, you come down to us and train to us, and now we are happy that we have trained our staffs, and our community NGOs are also trained on this. So we are very happy as a LWR. I'm saying we are very happy to collaborate with you, and very thank you for training us and giving the these opportunities, and also for inviting for this sharing learning webinar. David, over to you.
Thank you so much for that, Narayan. And I think one of the interesting things is that we started off by doing a pilot with 4, and then that expanded out to 12, and now there's another project in the area where we're taking the tool and using it in that other project. So if anything says that this thing has worked for you, it's the desire to take it into other spaces, which I think is really, really great. If you were to sum up perhaps the 1 or 2 of the key features of what it does, what would you say would be the kind of the top, the thing that it's provided you most that you didn't have before, that is benefiting you now?
I think the very good things I liked about it is it's a very it gives the pictures looking the project from holistic perspective. That's the I really liked that part, because it's not only focusing on one dimension of the the project or something. We can look at the project from the different the perspectives. It's from the capital's point of view. It's also the DRR cycle, where we are, just like the mitigation, preparedness, response, and the recovery side, where we are. And also we use that tools as a pre-flood event and also post-flood event, so that we can also compare that things, what happens and how the communities, became the resilient, after the floods. We have a data, we have a conditions of where they were before the flood, and also we can get the the data and pictures that how they responded to the flood. That's kind of the things beauty we really liked. And we were also using another tools, but it was a more statistical tools kind of things, and getting the more data, and that was not able to I would say that we have not able to gone to the the communities. And also it's a participatory tool, right? So that we can go to the communities, we work together with the communities, and we involve them, and communities also takes the ownership. In other tools, what we had used is just we form the enumerators or survey the teams, and we send to the communities. They collect the data, and we prepare the reports, and it was useful for our sake, but it was very difficult to communicate that the informations or the whatever the context we received to deliver to the communities. That was not happened in the previous, but this tool is really the participatory and also the flexible tools, so that we can add some of the contextual questions. We can add some contextual indicators and collect the data based on the localities, based on the the region, kind of the things could be we can additionally collect some of the information what we need through these tools. That's I really found very different than the other tools we had used, and found very useful. Over to you, David.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Narayan. It's always a pleasure to have been working with you on this, and it's great to see the enthusiasm you still bring to this, which is really cool. If I could turn to Vikram now, to Vikram Rana, who is a program manager for Practical Action, also in Nepal, ironically. Practical Action have been working with us for the last 8 years or so on this project. They started with us in 2013 and have been following us every step of the way in terms of the development of this tool. And Practical Action was also kind of on the ground in the first testing phase of how we were using it. They've been a core partner of the Zurich Flood Resilience Alliance from that point of view. Narayan, if I could, sorry, Vikram, if I could turn to you and ask you a kind of very general question here. If you were to think about the FRMC in your work, how has that supported the work that you do?
Well, thank you, David, for the question. So let me come into how it really helps us. So first thing is, as you mentioned, so it really brings in a kind of promotes system thinking. So if you look into the whole 5C4R framework, and then the result diagnosis that are done in our 25 communities. So let me first tell you how many communities we are working with. So 25 communities in the lower Karnali, and then 2 communities that was in Dang. So looking into these communities, so it also brings in, visualizes the strengths and weakness of community resilience from different lenses, as you mentioned, from the lens of 5 capitals, 4 properties of resilience, 7 themes, and the 5 stages of the DRM, disaster risk management cycle. So if you look into the whole results, then it also enables you to think in an innovative way, looking into the context or the results that come up from the tools. For example, if you see there is a weakness or there is a loss of life or property because of absence of flood early warning system, then it enables you to think and discuss with the community in a way that, okay, is it necessary to establish a new flood early warning system, or to strengthen the components, the 4 components of the early warning system that exists? So it takes you into a system. So all the 4 steps of the flood early warning system, you cannot do it at the community level. So it links you to the whole system, to the Department of Hydrology and Meteorology, and then the communication, the SMS that comes through, it's again, you need to connect to the private telecommunications. So it's a kind of evidence that is brought from the community, but then you have to link it to other government agencies as well. And then if you look into the community itself, so if you see, okay, there is inability of the community to contain loss or recover in a timely manner, then you can link it to the source of resilience. Like, okay, is it because of the inability to continue the household assets recovery, or is it because of the income continuity of the household or the community? So these are all linked. So it delves you into a kind of discussion. So what are the options? And you can talk it to the community and you can facilitate. Like for this, you can say, okay, what are the options? So it could be, you have lots of options. You can discuss on, okay, livelihood alternative options or alternative earning options, or is there a risk transfer mechanism, insurance? So yes, there is an insurance mechanism, but then the people are not buying it. Why they are not buying it? You can really dig into the roots and then think in an innovative way, so how to solve this one. So recently it has helped us that we need to design an index-based flood insurance. So we designed it, and then we approached Insur Resilience Solution Fund. Now we got the project and we are piloting that one. So I think if this tool was not there, we would not have thought in that systematic way that we need these kinds of things. So it's also a kind of thinking for us. But then if you look from the community perspective as well, then also, like, there are lots of weakness and strengths, then how you can continue the strengths and strengthen the weakness. Like, if you can come into the perception of the community. So they would say, okay, there is when there is a flood, children cannot go to the school. So what is the reason? You can discuss on many options. A children might not reach the school because there is no culvert, or the route is disturbed during the flood, or the school is submerged by itself, or the household itself is damaged and the children has to engage to support his or her family members. So you have lots of options. Then you dig into the roots and you design these interventions. So I think these are the things. I can go on, but then I think these are the things that I really like. It helps you to think in a systematic way, and then it helps you to really dig into the problem so that you help out the community, not only the community, but then if it requires local government support or the other government entities, you can also connect to that as well.
That's brilliant, Vikram. Thank you so much for that. I think one of the interesting things has been watching the way in which practical action has evolved the engagement with this, and the way in which it's helped to engage much beyond the boundaries of the project in which it started, which I think is a really interesting thing. Just thinking about the kind of the benefits of this tool. One of the things that we designed it to do is to be participatory. How has this changed the way in which you've engaged with communities?
Okay, I think.
Or not?
No. For me, it's an advantage because previously, before joining this program, I was with Water Resource Management Program, and there we also focused on the participatory approach and water use master plan. So I think it's an advantage for me to bring in that one and learn here. So if you look into the tool, it really augments the participatory approach, and you can start directly from the research when you design. So when you are designing these 44 sources of resilience, then as you said that we have 4 methods of data collection. Then after analyzing a community, you can bring in design, okay, for the household survey, what is the household status, means what type of people live in there? Is there an ethnicity that is marginalized, or is there a community household that is women led, or is there a household that has a kind of disability? Then when you design these household surveys, you can bring in them, so that you bring in the voices directly from them in the field by designing your research design. If you go to the focus group discussion also, you can bring in the voices of women by focusing, okay, there is a women's group, okay, if there is a mother's group, you can design to answer that questions from these groups, or the community forest users groups, so that you have, or the Dalit groups, or the marginalized, or the minority religious groups. If you have it, then you make these groups a kind of design so that they answer your questions. These data bring in the voices from all the strata of the community. That means when there is data that speaks the voices of all the people, when you bring it and when you diagnose it and then when you facilitate it, then they realize, okay, it's from them, data is from them. And now when you facilitate or design the interventions, they come into play because they understand it's from them. So, and then also it also helps you to, how you call it, negate the power relations. Like, okay, I would give you an example, like Narayan and you are in a community, and Narayanji has a, how you call it, household or his settlement has a good road, which rarely gets submerged during the flood. But then in case of David, there is a stream in between your settlement and then the safe evacuation shelter, but then the stream doesn't have a culvert or a breeze. But then when you come to a planning, if Narayan is powerful, then he will say that road should be improved. But then if you have these evidences from the people, then people speak. There is an empathy. People would say, no, David should get it because he is in more trouble. So I think this brings in the voices of the people, and then it also negates power relation. I think in that sense, it also brings in equity. And then if you look into the modes of participation, it also takes you to the higher modes of participation. It's not only the head count, it's also about the usefulness of the interventions or the discussions that you're discussing. It's not only for the project that, okay, these number of people were there, these were men, women, then no. If it's really discussed based on the data, then it really brings in that data and then the intervention designs. And then it also brings in the, how you call it, acceptance from the community people. And there is a horizontal accountability because people understand, because it's from them. And then secondly, what it gives is, it also brings in commitments from the leaders, the community leaders, and then the elected people. And then if you capture the local government planning process, they also envision that planning process should be participatory. So if you align with that planning process, then this is the first step, that you facilitate the community. their needs are identified, and then the second step is that it goes through another settlement committee, and then to the higher level, to the ward committee, and then to the Palika level. And then in this way, if you capture that process as well, and then if the needs of the communities are in the plan, that means you are facilitating the community needs, you are bringing investment not from your project, from the government. And that means they do not put directly because it's a need. They also look into the sectors that they have in. And if you look into the Nepali local government planning process sectors, they have 5 sectors, and they complement with these 5 livelihood capitals. So if you look into the planning process, they say economic development, social development, governance and institutional development, environment and disaster risk reduction. So these 5 sectors also complements, and that means you also somehow support the policies that they have. And if they are not supported, then you also bring in some, like if you see in the natural capital, there is no integrated flood management plan, you find it. That means there is a lack of policy or plans, so that you can also support the local governments in formulating these local. And in Nepal case, we are lucky, we are 3 alliance partners, that's IFRC, Mercy Corps, and we have a kind of combined advocacy based on the evidence that are generated from the community. So I can give you an example. So IFRC took a lead, and it worked with the Ministry of Federal Affairs and General Administration, and we developed this disaster risk management governance self-assessment tool. So this will be used at the local government level. So these are the things that, you know, it was generated from the evidence was generated at the community level, but then you can take it to further.
Fantastic, fantastic. Vikram, I always know if I just sent you one question, we can get a whole range of exploration from your answers. It's incredibly complex situation, but made very simple by your answer. Thank you so much for that. Thank you both Narayan and Vikram for sharing some of those experiences. I'm really conscious that this could have been 23 hours instead of just 1, but we'll kind of bring this segment to a close. I'll hand back over to Simone to perhaps take some questions from the audience.
Thank you very much, David, and also to Bikram and Narayan for sharing your lessons from implementing in the field. Feel free, Bikram and Narayan, to leave your videos on. We're now in a sort of like Q&A with the panel. I saw in the chat, and I captured those, so don't worry, your questions will come up. And I think the ones that have been asked thus far, I think we can hopefully answer all of them. We first got a comment or a sharing actually from Hasib, who shared us an interesting example of how the tool could be applied in the case of COVID. There's a link to the article, so I'm not going to ask you to tell us more about it, Hasib. People can read it and contact you if they have questions. But over to Dinanath Bandari, if you could unmute yourself and maybe even show your video and then say who the question is for and what the question is, that would be great. Dinanath, are you there?
No, yeah, thank you. I'm here, but I don't know whether I can show up or not. It's a little evening. Thank you. I think it's the question for probably all of us, but I wanted to just flow. So if I must indicate, then I think it's easy to indicate David for the question, because what I found is it can be used for various hazards and variety of communities with different exposures, single and multiple hazard. Maybe there is some necessity to adopt the style or approach or tactics. So how the Alliance is thinking to expand it into those areas. Thank you.
Thanks, Dinanath, and good to see you on this call. You're entirely right. We've chosen to focus on floods as a way forward, and so we've developed this tool very much looking at floods. One of the interesting things that our analysis has led us to, though, is that are thinking about resilience kind of centers it in the space of resilience of what, to what, and for whom. So it is very specifically looking to say, if you're looking at resilience, we have to think about the hazard that you're looking to be resilient for, because building resilience in one direction may well not give you resilience in another, and may in fact undermine your resilience in another unless you're very careful with it. So one of the things that we are struggling with, I guess, is this idea that you've got a multi-hazard kind of approach where you have a generic view of resilience, because it is very much about what are you resilient to and how are you resilient to that you need to be focused on. Interestingly, we are in the process of exploring developing the tool out to look at this idea of different kinds of hazards. And as we build them out to say we've got perhaps a flood tool and maybe a heat wave tool and maybe a wildfire tool, that those could be somehow or other combined in situations where the community experiences shocks from all of those different aspects. And that's definitely a work in progress and something that I think is something we want to evolve. But for the moment, it's down to just the floods process that we're confident that you can use at the moment.
Thank you, David. I hope it answers the question, and thanks for that sneak peek into your explorative work with the other shocks and stresses. Looking forward to learn more about that maybe in the next webinar. Kathy, I saw you also had actually two interesting questions. Please unmute yourself and indicate what the question is and who it is for.
Okay, wonderful. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. So in the way, my questions have actually been answered by Bikram and Narayan as they were answering. They were around the use of the tool and the measurement approach. Is it sort of at a project management level, but it sounds like it spilled over to the communities, and communities through the training may also be able to use it. And then Bikram was giving examples of how the government departments have actually then taken it to go on to do something else. So just from any one of the three presenters, it would be great to hear more. And then if I may add a bonus question, which came to me, I was wondering how you've been sort of doing awareness of this tool beyond just all of us who are here now hearing about it. Are other donors aware of it, and what has been the uptake and interest at their level? So two questions as well. Thank you.
I'm very happy to take the second one in the sense that it is very much a desire for us to share this tool, to try and put it into the hands of others. And so as a result of that, we are ramping up that exposure. Working with Narayan, who from LWR, who's outside of the Flood Resilience Alliance, was our first example of somebody from external to what our kind of funding program was all around. And that's about kind of the technical support of providing the tool. I've had a number of conversations though over the last year, and will continue to have conversations with organizations who are interested, but it's kind of turning that interest into action that is the next stage. Donors are a different kettle of fish. I haven't been able to find a good strategy for approaching donors with this thing at this moment. But I think Kathy, if I understand the underlying question with that, is that there is a requirement, I think, for donors to think a little bit differently to how you deal with programming and funding of programming, which then incorporates the idea of using an analysis tool before you decide on how to intervene. Because one of the things I think both Narayan and Vikram have made very clear is that the tool leads you to be able to design interventions. So funders are used to funding already predefined interventions, and this tool is definitely a little bit ahead of that. So there's a journey for funders to go on to try to reach that point.
Thank you, Narayan. Did you want to add to that?
It was a little bit. I had a problem with the internet. What was the Kathy's first question?
The first question. There are two first questions, but you had already answered them. So maybe I'll hand over to. I'll go to the next question because we only have 5 minutes left, and I'm actually supposed to hand over to David now for his closing remarks. But David, There are 3 quite good questions. I'll just give them to you as a team, the 3 of you, and see what you can answer. And then there's one question if the tool can be used in data scarce areas from Mayuri. Another one from Carolina, if there are possibility to see the tool and do NGOs have to pay for the tool? And then the third one from Molly, how can organizations receive training on this approach? And maybe one of you can answer that, or I think David, you'll probably have, and we can probably also provide information in the chat or also as a follow-up email to this webinar.
So if I can take almost the last 2 first. Yes, you can see the tool. In order to see the tool and the way in which it works, I need probably an hour to demonstrate how the tool would work, which is why it can't fit into this webinar format. But there's the final slide that I'll show you will talk about how to connect with that. We will share the slides afterwards, so you'll have a link to understand how to connect to get it in there. We provide the tools free of an upfront charge. The only costs are in actually making the implementation of the tool work. So that's getting training organised and so forth. We have developed since I did face-to-face training with the LWR team. We have developed an e-learning platform where we have a comprehensive training program now embedded as an e-course, which you can also link from the links that I'll share in the last slide.
And then the final question was if it can be used also in data scarce areas, for example, in areas where there wouldn't be as much secondary data available.
I mean, I think if I can kind of take that in the sense that it's designed deliberately to enable you to gather data in whichever way is appropriate. So if there isn't any secondary source data, the tools can be set up so you gather data through key informant interviews, through focus groups, through community groups, through individual households, where you get data right directly from the community itself. So I think that yes is the short answer, is that it can absolutely be used in data scarce areas.
Yes, we can. David, I'll hand over to you for the closing in your final slide. Thanks for the question. If you have further questions, you can reach out to David, and also Narayan and Bikram will share the contact details in the follow-up email. David, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Simone, and thanks for staying with us on this call, and the fact that we've kind of nearly reached the end of it. I'll try and keep this very brief. The part of the purpose of the call is to share with you what this tool is all about, and to whet your appetite a little bit to say, is this something that we want to find out a little bit more about? We are very keen to share it. We have deliberately created it in a way that it is free to use. It does require training. It does require an authorization, if you like, and a licensing process. So we do have a licensing agreement that organizations would need to sign up to, which basically says you'll use it in the appropriate development circumstances, not for commercial use, that kind of thing, and that you'll share some data with us in the sense of how you're using it and what experiences you're getting from it, because we're very keen to keep evolving and developing what the tool is. As you'll see on this slide, there are a couple of ways in which you can then get access to that. Firstly, go to our Flood Resilience portal. The link is at the bottom of the slide, which is floodresilience.net/FRMC_story. Basically, what that does is give you a brief about what this thing is all about, and more importantly, links to the other things. So it links you to a brochure where you can read more about it. It links you to a whole load of videos where you can hear more stories from the field about how people have used it. It also links you to a request form. So if you want to use the tool, there's a simple form to fill in, which basically says, this is my project, this is what I'm working on, this is why I want to use it, and we can then have a serious conversation. The conversation will include the demonstration of the tool, will also include, from the Alliance point of view, the allocation of a coaching support to help you take the tool from theory into practice. And as I've said, there's an e-learning process on there as well, which you can get hold of also through linking to this story. If you do want to know any further information about it, if you want to apply to use it by sending the request form in, then use the info@floodresilience.net website. If you do have any specific questions around this that you think it would be useful to contact me with, then I'm sure we'll put my email in the chat as well, which I'm very happy to have this conversation with those who are interested in taking this resilience measurement idea forward. Thanks a lot for being on this call. Simone.
Thank you, David. Thanks everyone for joining us today. And as you said, we will make the recording available to everyone along with the slides and further information. Hope to see you soon at our next webinar, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.